Thank you. I think I'm going to be ready. Yeah, well, I had Casey help out with the call in, and he had his first event yesterday, so his call in should be fairly interesting. It went really well, so he seems to be a happy camper. At least when I talked to him last night, he seemed to be pretty happy. Tired, but happy. Yeah. Cool, thank you. Good morning, everybody. This is Charles, the Cannabusiness Attorney. I can be reached at charles@thecannabusinessattorney.com. My partner in crime, KC, is out on the road. He is now in Kansas City, KC in KC. We're going to be hearing from him a little bit later on in the show. Hopefully he'll be able to call in and tell us what happened in Topeka. I spoke with him yesterday, and things seem to go very well in Topeka. That was his first event. So anyway, looking forward to hearing from KC. I want to give a shout out to my daughter up at All Greens in Denver, a pure medical store in Denver. Anyway, they have some of the best selection around, really, really great staff. I have to say that because my daughter's the manager of the store and she picked the staff. So anyway, the people at All Greens doing a fantastic job up there. I want to give a shout out to them. And Caitlin, my daughter, is feeling better. She had a little bit of a medical issue, but now she's fine and back at work. And anyway, unfortunately, our good friend, now Caitlyn Jenner, used to be Bruce Jenner, decided that when he came out as a woman, he was going to use the name Caitlyn and spell it exactly the same way as my daughter. So if I talk about Caitlyn, I'm talking about Caitlyn, my daughter, not Caitlyn Jenner. What we've been looking at generally is kind of a look around the states and what it means for businesses. And I saw a story out of New York. Actually, it's a little town called Wallkill, New York, about 30 minutes outside of New York City, a farming community. And it is kind of a testament to what you see when medical marijuana is introduced into your community. What happened in Wallkill was, I guess, a little surprising for me, but not really. What the people in Wallkill were faced with was there was the state of New York is in the process of accepting applications for medical marijuana operations. They're issuing 5 licenses, so you can imagine that the competition is fairly stiff. And if you don't have a location, in addition to the $200,000 application fee and the $10,000 application fee and $200,000 license fee, which would be refunded if you didn't get a license, you have to put up a $2 million bond for the if you don't have a location. Well, some people are scouting for locations, and they found this small little town. And one of the farmers, a guy by the name of Mr. Crawford, noted that there was a fallow field next to him. The company that wanted to come in, called Valley Agroceuticals, was planning on putting in the grow operation right next door. And rather than opposing it, he saw it for what it was and said, you know, I would much rather have that agricultural use right next to me, although he kind of looked at it as if it were going to be like a manufacturing / lab operation. But he said it's better than a bunch of houses. And when you look at what the town council then did after that, they kind of embraced the idea of having medical marijuana in their midst. They saw it for what it is, and that is as a way for an economic boost for the community. And the article that I read, which came out of the New York Times, basically said that there was an enthusiastic reception for the marijuana business, and it kind of shows how the public perception of medical marijuana has changed. And they are seeing, small communities are seeing the addition of a medical marijuana use within the or within their town or even near it as an economic boom. And so that's what we like to see. Here on the Cannabusiness Attorney Hour, we're talking about business. And if you can incite that kind of feeling in a jurisdiction where you're planning on starting your business, then those local businesses or those local governments will open their doors for you and make it so that it is easy for you to do business in that community. And you are going to be an asset to the community, whether, you're going to put people to work. You're going to, and not just the people that are going to be working strictly, hands-on with the marijuana, but like we've said before, it's going to be accountants and lawyers and plumbers and electricians and heating and ventilation guys, everybody, construction workers, everybody goes to work when these things come to town. One of the things that I noticed in the story in the New York Times was that the ground that Valley Agroceuticals was going to use was fallow, meaning that it was vacant. There wasn't anything there. And so the land is being put to use. Presumably the real estate taxes will go up because the land is now going to be more valuable. The buildings are going to be improved. And the guy that is running Valley Agroceuticals, he's smart. What he said is that he would, make it look like a barn with a cupola on top, that he would use the natural terrain because apparently the natural terrain has kind of a bowl in it. He agreed to put his operation kind of in the bottom of the bowl, surrounded by trees, so that it wouldn't be obtrusive to the neighbors. And so that's what you get when you get an alliance between a community and a cannabis business. You get that kind of symbiotic relationship where the community recognizes the benefit that you're bringing to the town, and the town benefits are huge, and also it makes it easier for the business to do business in that community. So hats off to the people in Wallkill, and also good luck to the people that are making applications in New York. Governor Cuomo in New York has made it clear that he is going to make sure that the restrictions remain very tight in Illinois, in New York. And right now the way the legislation in New York is that you can cultivate marijuana if you're one of the 5 people that are successful in getting a license. They expect you to have marijuana ready by January 1st of 2016, and certainly that's going to be a tough standard to meet. But in New York, they don't allow smoking, and also they only allow edibles if you get approval from the State Health Commission. So in New York, a very limited program, and we're going to talk about the difference between a very limited program and a a full-on comprehensive program where they use the entire plant. One of the things that I'm concerned about in New York, as and same with other states that have passed limited THC bills, I call it low THC, high CBD bills, is that it leaves a lot of patients behind. They don't get the medicine that they need, and it becomes so restrictive that a lot of debilitating conditions are left out. And so if you're advocating for your business and you're advocating that you need to move this legislation along in a positive direction, again, like I've said before many times, don't let them legislate your business right out of business. For instance, in Texas, Governor Abbott just signed into law a low THC, high CBD bill, but it is so restrictive that some are, criticizing it as being, well, it's not really a medical marijuana program because it's limited to just people with epilepsy. There is no smoking. It allows just oils with minuscule amounts of THC and high amounts of CBD, which is good for some conditions. But again, our vets that may be suffering from PTSD, people that are in chronic pain, people that are having problems because of multiple sclerosis or Parkinson's disease, people that are undergoing cancer treatments, all of those things are left out of the legislation. So those patients are not going to have access to the medicine that they really need. And it's a real shame that the politicians have developed this kind of strategy of paying lip service to the industry, but they do not, under any circumstances, make it something that is a really viable business operation, number one. And number two, it's not a system that treats the maximum number of patients. And I think that the people in those states like Texas deserve a little bit better. Now, it does open the dialogue a little bit, but I can tell you that the governor in Texas has made it very clear that as long as he's, it's on his watch, he is not going to espouse anything further than what he's already done, which is a very, very, very limited program. And I question, it's almost like they're trying to appease people without really going full blown. And again, I think that people in Texas and other places like Ohio and Iowa that have limited THC bills, I think that the legislators need to know that this is a situation that is not going away, that you're not going to be able to stuff this toothpaste back into the tube. Many years ago, I wrote an article about that regarding the marijuana industry, medical marijuana industry at that time in Colorado. And in Colorado, we did it kind of backwards, I have to admit, and that is that with our Amendment 20, which passed in 2000, and that's right, folks, we've been doing this now for 15 years, although, real full tilt for about 6 or 7. The industry, once one of the Holder memos popped up and said that the United States government was not going to use its resources to prosecute people who were in compliance with state law, the marijuana industry in Colorado just took off. And we were all of a sudden going from 1 or 2 or 3 dispensaries to, literally thousands of dispensaries and hundreds of grow operations all across the state under what we term the old caregiver model. Well, that worked until the government decided, and probably rightly so, that they needed some regulation. Most city ordinances did not have a checkbox for marijuana use, and certainly the state didn't have any regulations whatsoever. And so they decided that they would pass the necessary regulations and the rules and regulations to really rein in or get a grip on the Amendment 20 caregiver model, and they switched it legislatively from a caregiver model to a full-on business model, which was a really, really good positive thing. But it is a set of regulations that has been continuously being changed. But because Colorado had many, literally thousands of dispensaries before the regulations took place, there was no way in the world that the legislature or anybody else was going to stuff all that toothpaste back in the tube, because it had already been, set into motion. And so what they did was they took the existing businesses and made a business model around them to suit what was going on in the industry at the time. Now, they made some changes that made it a lot more difficult to be in the industry, and since 2010, when our House Bill 1284 was passed into law and became the medical marijuana code under the Colorado statutes, it is a situation where it continues to evolve. But in Colorado, we have embraced the entire plant, and we've made a business model out of it so that people that get into this business can understand exactly what they're getting into, what the pitfalls are, and what they can and cannot do. And so it saddens me to see, and we've treated literally hundreds of thousands. We have over 100,000 patients in Colorado, and we've treated literally hundreds of thousands of patients with medical marijuana. God knows how many people we've served with recreational marijuana. The benefits have far outweighed any of the detriments that have arisen. And as we'll see when we get further into the program today, there are states that are really beginning to bank on the marijuana businesses as a viable source of income for the state, and they're actually beginning to build their budgets around it. From a business standpoint, I think that's a giant positive move, and I also think it recognizes that these are viable businesses run by very astute business people, and there is no danger to the public about having them around. Now, having said that, when you've got a governor saying that he's vowed that he will not allow the industry to expand beyond what the very, very limited amount of use that's allowed in Texas, we've got a problem. And I think that if you're in Texas, you need to let the governor know that if he wants to remain the governor, he needs to start to embrace this product as a viable medicine and really take a hard look at it and see whether or not his constituents, the people that put him into office, are as in favor as of marijuana as he is in disfavor of it. Because I can tell you that the people that use marijuana, they are young, they are passionate, and also they vote. And that when we get closer to voting this November and throughout the years, we're going to be preaching absolutely you have to get out and vote, because that's the only thing that legislators will listen to, is if you tell them exactly what you want, and if they don't do it, you're not going to vote for them, then all of a sudden they don't have that job anymore. And most politicians like to keep their jobs. So again, if you're in Texas, Senate Bill 339, which gives an in for the industry in Texas, although it is not the be-all and end-all that you would like to see. Again, you've got to learn to play politics. And one of the things that you have to do is you have to send a clear message to the legislators that while we understand the bill was watered down, and we understand why the bill was watered down just so that it could get passed, it is not sufficient in its current form, and you have to take the minor victory that you got. But remember, you won a battle, you didn't win the war. And if you want to have viable businesses in Texas or any other state where they're passing these low THC, high CBD bills with a limited number of cultivation areas, and a limited number of licenses, you need to get out and speak up. Because if you don't speak up, you'll never be heard. And if you're never heard, you're never going to get into business. And again, you also need to look at the application process. How are these things going to be granted? So in Texas, they passed the bill. There are going to be cultivation facilities. There's going to be processing facilities in order to make this product available to patients. And so watch the rules and regulations. And again, don't let them legislate you out of business. Because if you let them do that, there won't be a business, and they will have paid lip service to people and say, oh, yes, we are very forward thinking. Look at us, how wonderful we are. When in fact, they really haven't done anything. As a matter of fact, they've done a disservice by giving the illusion that they've done something when in fact it couldn't be farther from the truth. So I guess what I'm encouraging you is when you do politics and you send these messages, you also have to look at what really happened. What's the reality? What does the law really say? Does it say that you have the ability to have a viable business? Can I really help patients with this? Can I really help all of the patients that I need to help? It is again, it's not just about cannabis. It's about exercising your rights as a United States citizen, as a citizen of Texas or wherever, and say, listen, we want this, and so we are going to have it. So we are going to try and hook up with KC after the break. We'll have some more information about what's going on around the country, and we will catch you on the other side. Thank you. Morning, how are you? Beautiful, beautiful. You're on YouTube broadcast, but not on the live feed. So we're on break right now. We got about another minute and a half. Yeah, that was Texas. And you're going to be going there, so we can hit on that. And I'm going to ask you about what happened yesterday, and everything from flying drones to the people that you meet, the story that they had to tell, and yeah, she's been a hero. You got to love somebody who's not a politician that is beating the politicians at their own game, and also is not afraid to speak up and quotes Jefferson. She is one sharp individual. There's no doubt about that. Okay. Okay, 10 seconds. Low Rider. Yeah, my favorite song. Anyway, we're back, and I've got Casey on the line. We're going to be talking about a lot of different things. You can reach Casey on howtomarijuana.com, and you can see him and his Facebook posts. Go to his Facebook page. Casey, tell him how to get a hold of you on Facebook. Yeah, let, let, let's talk a little bit about the senators. Let's start with the senators that wanted to talk with you but were unwilling to be on camera. What was their story? That's one of the things that I brought up this morning, and we're going to talk about it too. There's a story out of Washington about those budget constraints and how much money, at least the state of Washington anticipates that it's going to bring into the state coffers, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But let me just give you an idea of what Washington is anticipating. Now, granted, I think these numbers are a little bit high, but the Office of the Economic and Revenue Forecast Councils estimated that the state would yield 1.1 billion in marijuana tax revenues over the next 4 years in Washington. Now, what would 1.1 billion dollars do for the economy, the state economy? And that's just taxes. What would that do for the state of Kansas? In 1 month? Yeah, and that, and to me that when you have crops, viable crops, cash crops, like cannabis and like hemp, that could be put the farmers back on the farms where they belong, put the truck drivers back on the road where they belong, put the plumbers and electricians and everybody else back to work. For me, it's a no-brainer. But I mean, to hear those numbers, I mean, that is so disheartening, because there's a lot of people in the United States that believe that the recession is over and that everything's rosy. Well, I'm here to tell you it's not. Yeah, and again, you know, we've got this incarceration nation and private prison system that apparently is alive and well. That you know, I kind of like to see that get put out of business if we could. But you know, I didn't realize that things were that bad in Kansas, and to see that kind of job loss, both in the farming and non-farming sector, to me that's alarming. And that, you know, that's when you stand up, you know, kind of like, you know, you met Lisa, my new hero. I haven't met her yet, but I'll meet her in Kansas City. That's when people stand up and say, listen, we've had enough. We've had enough of, you know, this economy running us. It's time for us to run the economy. Yeah, well, it's a, you know, when we spoke yesterday, it's like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. I mean, you're spending a lot of money doing it, and that's great, and you know, it's a wonderful thing that the Capitol looks the way it is. But you know, you just have to look for a minute and go, isn't there a better way that you can spend your money? Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned the jazz musicians. It is, if you look at how the start of prohibition against marijuana started, one of the things that people pointed out was jazz musicians used marijuana, and that was evil. So, you know, it appears that jazz music has hit the mainstream, but unfortunately, the draconian look at marijuana has remained, either because there's an ulterior motive to keep someone in office or some big pharmacy company in business. But you mentioned also too that there were stories that you heard, people that came up and spoke with you. You mentioned yesterday about the lady that caught you in the parking lot in the middle of nowhere. She saw the van and was headed from Kentucky all the way to Colorado, yet another marijuana refugee. Tell us about some of the stories that you heard yesterday, and tell us a little bit about the event, the way it unfolded. Oh, ouch. See, and that kind of, heavy-handed, behind the scenes activity has just got to stop, and you've got to bring it to everyone's attention when it happens. That's the reason why yesterday, and I will do it every day that I'm in contact with KC, is I want law enforcement to know that when that van is driving around, there is not 1 gram of marijuana in it. We did it on purpose, not because we want to, but because we're afraid that if they got pulled over, that there would be, hell to pay, number one, that Casey could go to jail. And I'm here to tell you, law enforcement, if you're out there listening, and I hope you are, that if you find marijuana in that van, it's because you brought it, not because KC or Nashville did. And that is sad in my mind. That's very sad to have to say. And then you've got this nurse who's being persecuted. I'm not saying prosecuted, I'm saying persecuted because she believes in cannabis as a medicine and as a treatment. And I mentioned it yesterday. I believe, I've seen some evidence, and again, we need more research, but I've seen some evidence that rather than being a gateway drug, it's really an exit drug. It's a way to wean yourself off of heroin. It's an alternative to methadone. Yeah, and that's what I've been preaching is that, let's take a long, hard look at the data and what we're seeing. And, it may not, we may not have all the evidence that this plant is being held on a hypercritical standard, but I think it is an exit drug. And I also, and as opposed to a gateway drug. And also I think, and this is my personal opinion, I think that a lot of people that are users of marijuana may have a predisposition of some kind to go to harder drugs. And the reason why they don't go to harder drugs is because they have marijuana available. And so if I had to choose between someone who used marijuana and a meth addict living next door to me, I can tell you that every day and twice on Sunday, I'm going to vote on favor of, let's have the marijuana dude next to me, not the meth head. Yeah. Yeah, and again, with the lady that is dying from cancer, one of I read a quote one time, and I know I'm going to screw up the quote, but the quote was along the lines of, you can measure the uh, strength of a society by how it treats its worst off citizens. This is a lady that is dying. Why in God's name would you prevent her from having anything that she wanted in order so that the last days on this planet are at least tolerable? I mean, to me, that's a crime. There's the crime. Okay, Casey, we got to run to break right now. Can you stick around after the break? Okay, this is the Cannabusiness Attorney on the Cannabusiness Attorney Hour on letstalkpot.com. We'll catch you on the other side. Okay, mic's clear, Casey. We're still on YouTube, however. Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to hit that disclaimer every time that I can because I just don't want to see it get set up. And it is funny that there are marijuana leaves, hemp leaves, on the state capitol. Are they really? Are they really marijuana leaves? Hemp leaves. Okay, that'd be great. Thank you. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, not a whole bunch. I got a meeting with Med this afternoon for one of my clients, and then um, I'll be back in town, late afternoon, and then hitting it so I can get ready to get out of town on Thursday. I have court tomorrow morning, so we won't do a call in tomorrow. They're going to do a rerun tomorrow. I will be on the air on Thursday, and then of course Friday, both you and I will be gone. And it used to be such a vibrant community. I mean, there was a lot of stuff going on in Topeka. It, that is sad. Yeah, the only, the biggest employer is the government. That's not only sad, that's scary. But yeah, I can't wait to get out there. I can't wait to get out there and see you. Good morning. We're back. Casey's still on the line with us. Got a little people's court running in the background there. One of the things that you touched on, and I have to remind people from time to time, we are not on this program or on this station at all espousing the idea that you should break federal law. We are sympathetic to those that were in the, selling marijuana and they got caught, and that poor gentleman that spent years and years and years in prison. We're not espousing that as a way of combating this. What we are espousing is it's time for the people in the United States to wake up, show up, speak up, and say, listen, we've had enough of this. And, Kansas is but one example. You've got a dying economy. You've got most of the people in Topeka work for the government rather than in the private sector, which is crazy. In some places you would expect it, and a state capital is, you would expect more than your average number of government workers. But come on, let's get the rest of the state to work too. Yeah, and in the heart and soul of America, in a place where it's not all that popular. And, it takes an extraordinary amount of guts, on KC's behalf. And you've got to recognize that he's going into areas where, his message is not popular. The other thing is that the people that are coming out and speaking, they're fully aware that their message may not be very well received by a lot of people, but it's a message that has to get out there. I mean, you've got a state that's got, the farm business in Kansas is crashing. Well, here on the Cannabusiness Attorney, that's one of the things that we want to avoid or reverse. And that is that let's take a look at these plants, both cannabis and hemp, as what they are. They're a cash crop, and the sales and everything else that is associated with it generates tax revenue that sounds like Kansas could desperately use. Kansans. And I am no economist, don't get me wrong, but I have a theory that the way that you cure a deficit, and I don't care whether it's at the state level or the local level or at the federal level, the way you cure a deficit is you put people to work. People that are working pay taxes. People that are in business pay taxes. You don't have to raise the taxes. You just have to increase the amount. You know how you increase the amount? Put people to work. You put them in, the only industry that I know that has the astronomical numbers that are associated with it is the cannabis industry. I'm not going to say it's going to be the savior for every economy or anything like that. But what I will say is that it sure can't hurt. And if you put people to work doing something that they're passionate about, just the quality of life, just being around those people, I know it brings me up. It brings me to tears a lot of time, but it brings me up. I mean, people that are doing things are positive people. And it's not, like I said, it's not just the cannabis industry that we're talking about. It's your right to get out and exercise your liberties. You live in one of the best countries in the United States, or in the world, I mean, the United States. And so why not exercise all of the privileges that are associated with living here? You're paying the bill by paying taxes every year. So why don't you get out and do what you need to do, get up off the sofa and join these people, even though it is maybe not popular, but it is truly a life and death situation. I mean, people need to go back to work in this country. And it is important, I think, that Casey points out that whatever recovery we're having, apparently it skipped Kansas. And I'm guessing it skipped a lot of places. And that's 1 month in a fledgling industry. In Colorado in 2014, the first year of legalization, we had $58 million in tax revenue. And that was before the industry ever got off the ground. Well, and and these, the people, the senators that you saw peeking out, but being afraid to be on camera or actually really being heard, they need to come out of the shadows because their constituents need them. That's why you're in that position of power, is you are supposed to speak for the people that can't speak for themselves. That's your job. Your job is to take on difficult, almost impossible concepts and issues and get them out into a viable speaking arrangement where people can debate the pros and cons and come up with something that works for Kansas. I mean, that's your job. That's what you're supposed to be doing. You're not supposed to be robbing the highway department so that you can keep, a air conditioner going in some government office. I mean, this insanity. Well, and the other thing too is that really caught my attention is that in the artwork in the state capitol there are cannabis leaves because of hemp crops that were grown there. And I asked you during break, are they really cannabis leaves? And Casey said, yeah, they're really cannabis leaves. Well, think about it. What kind of a signal is that? I mean, that's almost like a prophecy. All you can do is open your eyes and look. Those of us that are in the industry, I'm sure that was the first thing that drew your attention is, wait a minute, they just spent $300 million redoing this thing, and there's cannabis leaves on it. Yeah, go to. See you there. Thank you, Chicago. I'll get that. Oh, no worries. Okay, perfect. Thank you. I'm going to be gone tomorrow and Friday. I'll be in on Thursday. Thank you. Yeah, I'll call you here in just about 3 minutes. Yep. Bye-bye.